I think we have a couple little twists in here. We have a couple little surprises. But for the diehard fans of Sleeping Beauty, I hope we have enough of the essence of what the classic, the beauty of the classic.
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.
Hey extraordinary people, I'm Daniel, and like most Disney fans, I love a good Disney villain. Now when I say a good Disney villain, I mean a good Disney villain. I do not mean a Disney villain who is now good. Case in point, Maleficent. Featured in the 1959 classic Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent is one of the greatest movie villains of all time. From her iconic entrance, to her diabolically evil laugh, to her transformation into a horrifying fire-breathing dragon, Maleficent is one of the most delightfully demonic characters ever brought to life on the silver screen. So what better idea than to make a live-action movie about Maleficent, where she isn't evil and doesn't even turn into a dragon? Just kidding. We all know Disney would never do something that stupid.
What's up, bitches?
God damn it. So in 2014, Disney released the live-action film Maleficent. While it got a few things right, like the visual design and the casting of Angelina Jolie in the lead role, pretty much everything else about this film just fell flat. In fact, you could easily say it was doomed from its very premise. I mean, you can't take one of the most evil villains of all time, take away everything audiences love about them, including their evil, and then make a good movie out of them, can you? Well, actually, as it turns out, yes, you can. In 2021, Disney released Cruella, starring Emma Stone and based on the character of Cruella de Vil from the 1961 animated film 101 Dalmatians. Now, I didn't think there was any way they could make this movie work. I mean, Cruella de Vil is a character who smokes in people's faces, drives like a maniac, and skins puppies to make fur coats. It would be impossible to make her sympathetic, right? Well, no. Apparently, it is possible. To my utter surprise, Cruella actually got it right. It's stylish, it's fun, it's outlandish, but it still has enough room for genuine heart and emotion. Is it perfect? No. But does it succeed at crafting a sympathetic and cool character from one of the most evil, unlikable villains of all time? Yes. So why is Cruella badass, while Maleficent sucks ass? Let's take a closer look at why Cruella succeeded where Maleficent failed. Part 1. The Birth of a Villain.
Anita, darling!
How are you?
Miserable, darling, as usual, perfectly wretched.
If we're going to sympathize with a Disney villain, then we need to understand three things. First, who was the character before they became evil? Second, why did they turn evil? And third, and most importantly, how did they turn evil? Maleficent needs to answer all three of these questions in order for its main character's fall from grace to be compelling. So let's see how it answers them. First off, the movie starts by showing us Maleficent before she became evil, as a fae living in and protecting the Moors. Even before her turn to the dark side, her name is still Maleficent, a word that literally means evil. One would think she named herself Maleficent after turning evil as a measure of intimidation or something, but no, that's just her name.
Her name was Maleficent.
That don't make no sense.
Even putting aside the laziness of that decision, her character development early on is very poor. She's given two main motivations for her eventual turn to evil. First, she cares about the Moors and fights to protect them. And second, she befriends and eventually falls in love with a human, the future king, Stefan. Neither of these motivations are the least bit compelling. First, her desire to protect the Moors makes sense on its surface, but the threat she has to protect them from makes no sense at all. You see, the human king Henry really wants to take over the Moors, so much so that he leads an army to attack it, and doesn't retreat until Maleficent fatally wounds him. But it's never clear what he actually wants. We hear a few lines of narration about how the humans are greedy and envious, but it's never actually stated what they're greedy or envious of. So it's difficult to be invested in the resulting battle when we don't even know what the two sides are fighting over. Oh, and speaking of narration, let's talk about Maleficent's other, and narratively far more important motivation, her relationship with Stefan. Maleficent meets Stefan as a child trying to steal from the Moors and befriends him. The two eventually fall in love, but then grow apart, due to their completely different lives and ambitions, with Maleficent needing to protect the Moors and Stefan aspiring to become king. Stefan sees his chance after King Henry is wounded by Maleficent, and promises that whoever can avenge him will inherit the throne. Stefan goes to visit Maleficent and rekindles his relationship with her. Then, he drugs her, and being unable to bring himself to kill her, cuts off her wings and brings them to King Henry as proof of her death. When Maleficent wakes up, she is in agonizing pain, her wings are gone, and she knows exactly what happened. Vowing revenge, she becomes the villain that we all know and hate. So, why doesn't this work? Well, because we never actually see the relationship between Maleficent and Stefan. Instead, it's narrated to us via voiceover.
Friendship slowly turned into something else. Stefan gave Maleficent a gift. He told her it was true love's kiss.
I guess you could say things are getting pretty serious.
They spoke of many things, and the years faded away. And she forgave Stefan, and all was as it had been long ago.
I can't stress enough how bad of a decision this is. One of the basic rules of storytelling, and especially filmmaking, is show, don't tell. Film is a visual medium, and audiences need to be able to spend time with characters in order to care about them. So if we're going to care about the relationship between Maleficent and Stefan, then we need to actually see it. The fact that we don't means that this betrayal carries no weight. It feels hollow. It doesn't feel like Maleficent has actually lost anything because we never see what she had in the first place. Because of this, her transformation into a villain feels rushed and unearned. Alright, so what does Cruella do differently? Well, first, and most basically, Cruella isn't actually her real name. Her name is Estella, and Cruella is just a nickname that her mother gives her. So already some evidence that Cruella has learned from Maleficent's mistakes. Now, similarly to Maleficent, Cruella also uses narration, but uses it differently. The narration isn't from an impersonal, omniscient narrator. It's from Estella herself, giving us her perspective on what's happening. Also, the narration doesn't just tell us what's going on. It gives us part of the picture, and the visuals do the rest. It complements what we see on screen.
That didn't sit well with some people.
This is a blot on your copybook.
Okay, that didn't sit well with a lot of people.
So just like with Maleficent, we're introduced to Estella as a child, and we learn some important things about her. She gets made fun of for her unusual hair, and she develops some behavioral and anger management issues. As a result, she gets in trouble at school, but also learns to be independent and stand up for herself, while developing a love for fashion and her own personal style. Eventually, Estella is kicked out of school, and her mother, who's single by the way, is in financial straits. She goes to a friend who lives in a huge mansion to ask for money. Estella is told to wait in the car, but sneaks out to see the mansion and finds herself in the middle of a huge fashion show. Her cover is blown, and in the ensuing chaos, she gets chased by some Dalmatians who end up knocking her mother off a cliff to her death. Estella blames herself and is forced to run away and live on the street. She eventually meets two other street urchins, Jasper and Horace, and the three of them start a life of crime together, doing whatever they have to survive. So already with Cruella, in the first 15 minutes, we have a compelling backstory and a character we can sympathize with. However, the movie isn't done yet giving us reasons to root for Estella. Next we see her, she's grown up and still living a life of crime with Jasper and Horace, using her fashion skills to make disguises for them. Eventually though, she wants to work as an actual fashion designer and gets a job at a high-end fashion store, where she is horribly mistreated and her skills are ignored. One night, she drunkenly redesigns one of the window displays, and even though she gets fired, she catches the attention of the Baroness, a famous fashion designer, who hires Estella to work as her personal assistant. Estella learns that her mother's mysterious friend was the Baroness, and that the Baroness not only views Estella's mother as a thief and a failure, but also has a necklace that used to belong to her. Angry, Estella begins a plot to upstage the Baroness and steal back the necklace. So unlike Maleficent, Cruella doesn't just become a villain overnight. It's a gradual process that feels believable. We get to see that process, and because of that, we understand why she does what she does. Her choices make sense, and her development into the villain we know feels earned. Now that both of our villains have their backstories and motivations, it's time to see what they do. Part 2. The Reign of Terror.
You poor simple fools, thinking you could defeat me, the mistress of all evil.
Blast this pen! Blast this wretched, wretched pen! Ah!
Now that our villain has been established, we can get to the meat of the story: conflict. Conflict is the core component of any story, and it consists of two things: intention and obstacle. Intention is what a character wants. Obstacle is what stands in their way. Now, we understand Maleficent's intention. She wants revenge on King Stefan for stealing her wings. So how does she go about trying to achieve this goal, and what obstacles stand in her way? Well, she decides to wait around for a year until her servant Diaval tells her that Stefan has had a baby. Maleficent decides that now is the perfect time to get revenge, so she goes to the castle and curses the baby, Aurora, to prick her finger on her 16th birthday and fall into a deep sleep from which she will never awaken. When Stefan begs her to stop, Maleficent adds that Aurora can awaken, but only through true love's kiss, which Maleficent believes doesn't exist. Now I have several questions about all this. First of all, why did Maleficent wait so long to get her revenge?
He did this to me.
Many months later.
Second, why didn't she even try to get her wings back? And most importantly, why was Maleficent, a completely moral character up to this point, totally okay with cursing a baby to death?
It's not right to steal, but we don't kill people for it.
Later.
She will prick her finger on the spindle of the spinning wheel and fall into a sleep like death!
Boy, that escalated quickly.
I mean, if she had wanted to hurt Stefan, I would have understood why, but cursing his baby while leaving him unscathed makes no sense coming from this character with this motivation. So after Maleficent curses Aurora and leaves, Stefan sends Aurora off with 3 fairies to keep her safe. And what does Maleficent do? Continue her psychological torture of Stefan? No, she goes and watches over Aurora for some reason. Again, this makes no sense. Her beef is with Stefan, not Aurora. She cursed Aurora because of what it did to Stefan, so why would she leave Stefan alone to go torment Aurora, far away where Stefan wouldn't even know about it? Well, it's a moot point because she doesn't even do that. She just kind of makes fun of Aurora and plays basically innocent tricks on the fairies and watches over Aurora at the same time.
So ugly, you could almost feel sorry for it.
Oh, come on, that's funny.
Give me that.
Beyond her initial cursing of Aurora, Maleficent doesn't actually do anything villainous at all. So if she's supposed to be a villain now, why doesn't she act like one? And if she's supposed to not really be a villain, you would think she would try to reverse her curse on Aurora at some point. Well, she does. After 15 years. And of course it doesn't work because she said no power on Earth could change it.
I revoke my curse! Let it be no more!
Oh, no. That was not smart. That was not smart.
I hope you can see by now that Maleficent's character development in this film is just a complete mess. She goes from being a morally good character, to being completely over-the-top ludicrously evil, to backing off and just trying to appear evil without actually doing anything evil. It's incoherent, inconsistent, and impossible to take seriously. So what does Cruella do differently? Well, first of all, it helps that her motivations are actually set up properly, but even disregarding that, she actually follows through on her motivations. Estella, Jasper, and Horace plan their biggest heist yet, upstaging the Baroness and stealing the necklace. And everything about this scene feels wickedly fun. See what I did there? The music, the rapid-fire editing, the way we get to see the plan unfold as they plan it, is just way more engaging on a cinematic and character level than anything Maleficent has. But our villain still hasn't made her grand entrance yet. In order to distract attention away from the break-in, Estella decides to crash the Baroness's fashion gala in disguise. And this is when we finally meet Cruella. Now the fashion gala has a strict rule of only black and white costumes, and this is how Cruella makes her entrance. Now, not only is this scene totally badass, but it has one very obvious advantage over Maleficent's grand entrance at Aurora's christening. Can you tell what it is? It's an original scene. It's not just a mediocre copy of a scene from the animated film. It's a completely new concept. Now don't get me wrong, Maleficent's entrance is probably the best scene in that film, but it really only works for one reason, the performance of Angelina Jolie. As we discussed earlier, story-wise it makes no sense. Cruella's entrance, on the other hand, works on every level. It's the exact thing her character would do, it's smart, and it works. The electrifying acting, music, and visual design are really just the icing on the cake. And let me take this opportunity to bring up one more thing Cruella has going for it, a really good antagonist. Emma Thompson as the Baroness is exactly the energy that was missing from Maleficent's King Stefan. She's smart, intimidating, ruthless, and an absolute joy to watch on screen. Watch how threatening she can make a simple exchange.
Did you just lie to me? No, I...
Don't cry.
I'm not.
You will.
So Cruella talks to the Baroness and is able to steal the necklace until a Dalmatian eats it. But while she, Jasper, and Horace are escaping, the Baroness uses a dog whistle just like the one when Cruella's mother was killed, making Cruella realize that the Baroness murdered her mother. They escape using a car like the one Cruella has in the animated film, a really good callback by the way, and Estella vows revenge on the Baroness. See how character development works better when you escalate the conflict throughout the film? The stakes here only get bigger and more intimate as the film progresses, which is exactly how conflict is supposed to work. Contrast that with Maleficent, which has no discernible stakes pretty much throughout the entire movie. Speaking of character development, Cruella may already be a villain on the outside, what with her persona and costume, but at this point in the story, her thirst for revenge starts to turn her into a villain on the inside. She starts to treat everyone, including her friends, as less than her, and she revels in her newfound infamy as she continues to upstage the Baroness's events and commit more and more extreme acts of sabotage against her. So Cruella starts to crash the Baroness's public appearances, and these scenes are just so much fun. From the music, to the insane visuals, to the crazy costumes that she wears, this whole sequence is just bursting with imagination. My favorite part is when Cruella pulls up in a garbage truck, wearing a dress made out of literal garbage, which is not only visually hilarious, but even better when you realize that the point she's making is that even garbage is better than the Baroness's designs. This all culminates when Cruella destroys the Baroness's dresses right before her fashion show, staging her own fashion show outside. While Cruella's entrance at the Baroness's gala was a killer entrance, this scene cements her as a force to be reckoned with. This is something that Maleficent is completely missing. She's set up to be a villain, but we never actually get to see her be a true villain. Cruella feels like a real villain. At this point in the film, she only cares about herself, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to get what she wants, no matter who gets in her way. And that brings us to Part 3, All the Powers of Hell.
Now shall you deal with me, O Prince, and all the powers of hell!
Alright, so the stage is set for our grand conclusion. Maleficent's curse has finally come to fruition, and Aurora has fallen into a deep sleep from which she can't awaken, except through true love's kiss. Maleficent knows that Aurora met the young Prince Philip earlier, and suspects that he may be her true love. So she knocks him out, carries him to the castle where Aurora is sleeping, wakes him up, and after quite a bit of convincing, he kisses her.
Aurora?
He knows her.
Why is she sleeping?
She's trapped in an enchantment. Isn't she beautiful?
Most beautiful girl I've ever seen.
Do you want to kiss her?
Very much.
One eternity later.
An enchantment, you say?
But oh no, it doesn't work. Who could have seen this coming? Maleficent apologizes to Aurora before kissing her on the forehead, and who could have guessed it wakes her up. Because Maleficent is apparently Aurora's true love. Or something like that.
I'm in lesbians with you.
What?
This scene, which is the emotional climax of the film, doesn't work for two reasons. To help illustrate what those reasons are, I'm going to contrast this scene with the scene from another Disney movie, and that is the climactic scene from Frozen. In Frozen, Anna's heart has been frozen by Elsa, and she will die if she doesn't perform an act of true love. She eventually realizes that Kristoff truly loves her and goes to kiss him. However, when she sees Elsa about to be killed, she abandons this plan and chooses to save Elsa instead, sacrificing herself in the process. That sacrifice, though, constitutes an act of true love, bringing Anna back to life and proving that true love goes far beyond romance. This scene in Frozen works for two reasons. First, it establishes and demonstrates Anna's love for Elsa, not just throughout the film, but in the act itself. Anna repeatedly risks her life for Elsa and eventually gives it up, fulfilling Olaf's definition of love, putting someone else's needs before yours. Secondly, it accomplishes a successful bait and switch between what Anna thinks will be her act of true love and what it actually ends up being. Kristoff's selfless love for Anna is also demonstrated throughout the film, with him risking life and limb for her, and ultimately giving up his desire to be with her so that she can be with who he believes is her true love. So when Anna realizes that Kristoff has true love for her, we the audience genuinely believe that he may be the one to thaw her frozen heart. When our expectations are subverted, it makes the scene that much more engaging, and the film's message in general that much more powerful. Maleficent is trying to do a similar thing to what Frozen did, but doesn't do any of the things that Frozen did to make it work. First, Maleficent's true love for Aurora is never well established or demonstrated in the film. Yeah, she saves her life and cares for her to some extent, but she doesn't have to risk or lose anything to do it. Maleficent's relationship with Aurora is shallow throughout the film, and we never see the two of them develop any kind of deep or substantive connection, and we never see Maleficent have to give up or risk anything for Aurora. So when Maleficent's kiss is deemed a true love's kiss, it just rings hollow. Secondly, the bait and switch in this film doesn't work at all. In fact, it's so bad it's comical. We're supposed to believe that Prince Philip is Aurora's true love, even though they've only met once. But Daniel, you're probably saying right now, that's exactly what happened in the original Sleeping Beauty. Well, not exactly. In Sleeping Beauty, Prince Philip has to fight his way out of Maleficent's castle, and then face Maleficent herself as a dragon, in order to get to Aurora. He could have just run away, but he chooses to put his life at risk to be with her. Now, you may still say that's extremely simple, which is fair enough, but Sleeping Beauty was only trying to be a simple fairy tale, whereas Maleficent is trying to be something more complex, questioning and examining the archetypes and assumptions contained in the original story. But honestly, none of that even matters, because in this version, Prince Philip shows even less true love than he does in the original. The fact that Maleficent has to knock him unconscious and carry him to the castle to get the two of them together should immediately dispel any notion that this is true love.
Kiss her!
Nothing about this scene works, and I honestly can't imagine how the filmmakers thought anyone could be invested in this or find it compelling. So after that, we get a big CGI fest where Maleficent doesn't even turn into a dragon. She just turns Diaval into a dragon, and there's a huge fight. She very easily gets her wings back, negating the entire conflict of the movie. She spares Stefan's life, but he still dies, negating the film's message of forgiveness. And the movie ends with Maleficent and Aurora uniting the Moors and the human kingdoms, which they could have just done in the first place, and we wouldn't have had to watch this movie. So, without a solid foundation of compelling conflict and characters that we care about, Maleficent's final act collapses into nonsensical incoherence. We don't care about Maleficent waking Aurora because we never saw them develop any kind of relationship. We don't care about Maleficent turning back to the good side because she was barely even a villain. We don't care about Stefan dying either because he was barely even a villain. I mean, the only evil thing he does in this movie is cut off Maleficent's wings, which, 1, she easily reverses, and 2, he did as an alternative to killing her, which doesn't make it okay obviously, it's still wrong. But this movie goes out of its way almost to show us that Stefan isn't as bad as he could be. I mean, unlike his predecessor Henry, Stefan actually leaves the Moors alone when he becomes king. So, it's clear Maleficent didn't put in the effort necessary to make us engaged in its drama or care about its characters. So let's look at Cruella's final act and see how a film that's properly set up its conflicting characters can deliver a satisfying ending. Estella arrives back home from her impromptu concert/fashion show to find Jasper and Horace tied up and the Baroness and her minions waiting for her. The Baroness has Estella tied up and the house set on fire, framing Jasper and Horace for her murder.
You're going to kill me because I upstaged you.
However, Estella is rescued by John, the Baroness's valet, who gives her the necklace she's been after and tells her that the Baroness is her biological mother. The Baroness tried to have Estella murdered at birth, but John saved her by giving her to Catherine, who became Estella's adoptive mother. The only child of the Baroness, Estella is now the sole heir to her fortune. Torn apart, Estella leaves to contemplate her legacy, and concludes that she will never be the kind of person Catherine wanted her to be. There is none of Estella left in her. There is only Cruella. She breaks Jasper and Horace out of jail, apologizes for how she's treated them, and they devise their final revenge plan. At the Baroness's gala, Estella arranges for all the guests to dress as Cruella. Blending into the crowd, Estella steals the Baroness's dog whistle and uses it to lure the Dalmatians, and by extension the Baroness, outside, where she waits by the cliff where her mother died, dressed as Estella. She reveals that she knows the Baroness is her mother, and the Baroness tries to manipulate her, promising that she's sorry and they can mend their relationship. John directs the guests outside, where they all see the Baroness push Estella off the cliff. The Baroness is arrested, and we see that Estella was wearing a parachute, and with the public now believing that Estella is dead, she is free to live as Cruella de Vil, to whom she has willed her fortune. The movie ends with her sending Dalmatian puppies to two friends she made earlier in the movie, Anita and Roger, who you may recognize as the main human characters from the original 101 Dalmatians. Now, I do have some questions about this, mostly relating to the legality and logistics of Estella faking her own death and leaving her own fortune to herself without anyone finding out who she is. I mean, she would have to fill out some paperwork or show an ID or something at some point. And how are Jasper and Horace just off the hook for escaping from jail? But when those are my biggest questions, then you know this movie has done something right. Cruella's final act doesn't just feel big, it feels intimate. Cruella not only faces her greatest external threat, almost getting killed in a fire and having Jasper and Horace arrested and framed for it, but she also faces her biggest internal challenge. Will she complete her journey to villainy by killing her enemy?
I know you're in pain. And I know that she caused it, but killing her is not going to make that go away.
Where Maleficent tries to have its cake and eat it too, by having Maleficent spare Stefan's life only for him to die anyway, despite arguably not deserving it, Cruella presents a villain who actually does deserve to die, and the very real possibility that Estella may actually kill her. However, the movie questions what it might do to Estella if she actually goes through with it. In the end, Estella chooses to spare the Baroness's life, delivering justice without exacting revenge, and completing her character arc into a fully realized individual, who is able to be who she really is, but still honors the legacy of her real mother, Catherine. Part 4. Conclusion.
You idiots! You fools! Oh, you imbecile!
Shut up.
Maleficent is far from the worst film, or even the worst Disney remake I've ever seen. It has a beautiful visual design, a great musical score, and Angelina Jolie practically deserves an Oscar nomination for her performance. But none of that matters without a good script or characters we can care about. Maleficent and Cruella make many different choices, resulting in one film that works and another that doesn't. But one choice stands out in particular as being foundational to Cruella's success and Maleficent's failure. And that is, simply put, Maleficent is too tied to its original film, while Cruella is free from the constraints of its own. Remember when I said that it doesn't make sense that Maleficent curses Aurora when her actual beef is with Stefan? Well, that's what happens in the original film. Or how it makes no sense that Maleficent would think that Prince Philip is Aurora's true love. Well, that's what happens in the original film too. The problem is that Maleficent has been built around following the plot beats of Sleeping Beauty, even though the story's foundation has been fundamentally changed. This forces the filmmakers to make Maleficent do whatever the plot needs her to, even if it conflicts with what the character built up in the film so far would organically do. As a result, events that make sense in Sleeping Beauty make no sense in Maleficent.
Oh dear, what an awkward situation.
Maleficent wants you to think it's subverting the story of Sleeping Beauty, but the truth is the exact opposite. It's trying too hard to be like it. Cruella, fortunately, couldn't do the same thing. After all, the original Cruella de Vil skins puppies and makes them into fur coats. You can't make that character sympathetic while keeping everything else the same. So the filmmakers did what all filmmakers should do when they remake a movie. They took elements of the original and used them to create a new character and a new story. Emma Stone's Cruella bears little resemblance to the original Cruella de Vil, except for her bi-colored hair, aggressive and sarcastic attitude, and flair for fashion. And her story bears no resemblance whatsoever to 101 Dalmatians. But that's exactly why it works. It doesn't feel like a tired retread of the past. Instead, it's new, it's exciting, and it feels as close to an original story as a Disney live-action remake or reimagining of an animated film has probably ever felt. Judging by the success of these films, it's pretty clear that we're going to be getting more of these villain-centric reboots. If and when we do, I hope that Disney follows in the path of Cruella and creates something that's more unique and original, and not just a retread of a past success. Because I think if there's anything we can learn from Cruella, it's that all of us, movies and people, should let go of others' expectations of us and just be who we really are. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate if you could leave me a like, comment below, subscribe to the channel, and remember that you're extraordinary. I love all of you so much. Bye. 'Cause you're extraordinary. Yes, you know it's true. Extraordinary. That's why